There are secrets locked away in the heart of British power. Files sealed, redacted, and withheld from public view. Behind those files lies one of the most controversial chapters in modern royal history. The years when Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, served as the United Kingdom's special trade envoy. It was a role that was meant to promote British interests abroad, but which, over time, became clouded by allegations of impropriety, privilege, and profit. To this day, the government has refused to release the full records of Andrew's activities during that period. And the question that lingers, growing sharper with every passing year, is simple. What are they hiding? Before we dive in, there's something I need to share with you. Over the past few days, thousands have watched these stories unfold, but most haven't subscribed. If you're one of them, I invite you now to join us. Subscribe to Crownverse so you never miss the next chapter in this unfolding royal history. The story begins in 2001, at the height of global optimism in a new millennium. Prince Andrew was appointed as the UK's Special Representative for International Trade and Investment, a post created to use his royal connections to open doors for British business. It was a role both prestigious and risky, one that blurred the line between public service and personal influence. For a decade, the Duke of York travelled the world, representing British interests from Asia to the Middle East, shaking hands with heads of state, business magnates, and politicians. But as his presence grew abroad, so too did questions about what those trips really achieved and who truly benefited. It was meant to be a position of service, but by the time Andrew stepped down in 2011, it had become a position shrouded in suspicion. Reports of lavish trips, questionable company, and undisclosed deals had eroded public trust. Most troublingly, the documentation of those years, the meeting notes, correspondence, and trip records, never reached the light of day. Under normal circumstances, such records would enter the National Archives. But in this case, they remain closed, sealed under government protection. The official reason, privacy and national interest. The unofficial reason, many suspect, is protection, not of the nation, but of the monarchy. Freedom of information requests have repeatedly been denied. Researchers and journalists who have sought access to the Duke's official trade records have met the same response. The files are exempt. The government has invoked clauses meant for matters of national security and diplomatic sensitivity, terms that carry heavy weight but which also conveniently shield the royals from scrutiny. What could possibly be so sensitive about a trade envoy's travel logs, contracts, and meetings that it must be kept from public eyes for decades? The question has become more than bureaucratic. It is existential. Because the answer may reveal not just the behavior of one man, but the boundaries of royal accountability in a modern democracy. The stakes are enormous. The monarchy exists not by law alone, but by trust, the belief that its members embody integrity, transparency, and service. Yet these sealed files tell a different story, one where transparency collides with protectionism. For those within the palace, the reasoning is obvious. Releasing private communications between a senior royal and foreign leaders could jeopardize relationships, expose informal diplomacy, or even embarrass the institution. But to critics, this defense is a smokescreen. They argue that the secrecy is not about protecting the nation, it is about protecting the family. Prince Andrew's trade envoy years were marked by a pattern of associations that would later haunt him. His friendships with figures in Kazakhstan, Libya, and the Gulf raised questions about whether his royal status was being leveraged for commercial gain. There were allegations of business favors and introductions of blurred lines between representation and self-interest. None of these allegations were ever proven, but they have never been conclusively disproven either. And the one thing that could resolve them, the release of the files, remains locked away. The implications stretch far beyond one man. They reach into the heart of Britain's constitutional arrangement, where monarchy and government intertwine, sometimes seamlessly, sometimes uneasily. The British monarchy claims to be above politics, yet it exists at the center of power. And in moments like this, when the government shields royal documents, it becomes difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. What happens when the desire to preserve the dignity of the crown collides with the public's right to know? For historians, the pattern is familiar. Royal secrecy has long been defended under the banner of stability. The letters of Queen Elizabeth II to her governors-general in Australia, for instance, were sealed for decades until a court battle forced their release. Even then, they revealed not scandal, but influence, subtle but unmistakable. That case set a precedent. Royal communications are not untouchable. Yet in Andrew's case, the files remain firmly under lock and key, their existence acknowledged but inaccessible. It raises the uncomfortable suspicion that the contents are not merely sensitive, they are compromising. Imagine the scale of information those archives might contain. Travel schedules detailing every destination, correspondence between the Duke and business leaders, minutes of meetings with heads of state, records of government support, funding and security, expense reports, who paid for what and why, even whispers of how personal relationships blurred into official ones. All of it sits in silence, filed away in government vaults that may remain sealed for generations. It is, in effect, a royal black box, and the public can only guess what it holds. There is, of course, another layer, the Crown's enduring ability to shape the narrative. For centuries, the British monarchy has survived not by transparency, but by control of perception. When controversy arises, the institution does not deny or confess. It absorbs, redirects, and outlasts. The withholding of Andrew's files fits this tradition perfectly. By keeping the records secret, the palace and government avoid direct confrontation. They simply wait for time to pass, for memory to fade, for the story to become history. But in the digital age, time no longer buries scandals, it archives them. King Charles III, meanwhile, finds himself in a delicate position. His reign, defined by restraint and modernity, depends on restoring moral credibility to the monarchy. Yet he must also protect its stability, and that means maintaining the line of secrecy that shields the family. The files from Andrew's envoy years predate his kingship, but their implications fall squarely upon his reign. To release them would be to risk new embarrassment for a monarchy still recovering from years of controversy. To keep them sealed, however, reinforces the perception of a family that hides its truths behind a veil of privilege. The irony is striking. The institution that commands centuries of loyalty now finds its legitimacy questioned not by rebellion, but by curiosity. Transparency has become the new form of accountability, and each refusal to release information feeds the sense that there is more to hide. Even if the contents of the York files are mundane, trade reports, itineraries, polite correspondence, the refusal to release them gives them power. Silence becomes suspicion. Secrecy becomes story. Some see the government stance as an act of preservation. The monarchy, after all, is a constitutional pillar. To expose its inner workings could weaken the mystique that sustains it. But others argue that the opposite is true,
that secrecy erodes faith faster than scandal. In a democratic society where the public funds and protects the crown, transparency is not an act of rebellion, but of respect. To know the truth is to understand the institution. To conceal it is to risk its future.
The legal justification for sealing Andrew's records lies in the intricate dance between the monarchy and the state. The royal household is technically a private entity, yet its members perform public functions funded by taxpayers. The government's role as gatekeeper of those records places it in a position of complicity. It shields not just the monarchy, but itself from scrutiny over how much oversight was exercised, how much money was spent, and whether boundaries were crossed. And so, the files remain in limbo, a ghost archive, invisible yet undeniable. They are a reminder that the crown's greatest power lies not in revelation, but in omission. The less it says, the more control it keeps. But control has a price. As each new generation grows more accustomed to transparency and accountability, the old codes of silence begin to crack. The monarchy, if it wishes to endure, must decide how much of its past it can afford to hide. It is possible that one day, decades from now, the York Files will finally be released. They will be studied by historians, dissected by journalists, and debated by the public. And when that day comes, the question will not only be what those documents reveal, but why they were hidden for so long. For now, though, they remain locked behind the iron gates of Buckingham Palace and the bureaucratic walls of Whitehall, their secrets sealed under the weight of royal discretion. The mystery lingers like fog over the Thames, thick, immovable, and faintly glowing with the light of hidden truth. Somewhere within those pages lies a story the monarchy would rather we forget. And until those files are opened, we are left with questions that echo louder than any answers could. What really happened during Prince Andrew's trade envoy years? What deals were made? What favors exchanged? What boundaries were crossed? And most hauntingly of all, why must history wait to know? If you've watched this far, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Should the royal files remain sealed in the name of protection, or is the truth worth exposing no matter how uncomfortable it may be? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into the shadows of royal secrecy, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Crownverse, where royal history lives on.